including the Kwantlen, Katzie, and Semiahmoo First Nations. Just some housekeeping rules. A recorded version of this webinar will be made available on the BCFFPA YouTube channel. We will also be sending everyone a copy of the PowerPoint slides and some resources about the rider insurance program. All participants will be muted. If you wish to ask a question, please use the Q&A box below your screens, and our presenters will answer them during the Q&A portion at the end of the presentation. Please write your questions as clearly and completely as possible. You can also raise your hand using the Zoom hand raise function and wait for the host to call your name before unmuting your microphone. For those who submitted some questions in advance, we will be answering them during the Q&A portion. Please use the chat box to share information, ask for technical support, and to communicate with the presenters. If you're watching the recording and you have a question, or if you come up with a question after the webinar is over, you're welcome to email your questions to office@bcfosterparents.ca. About our presenters. Erin FitzPatrick has been a commercial insurance broker for over 10 years with Megson FitzPatrick Insurance Services, and has spent the majority of that time focusing on nonprofit clients. She holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Western Ontario, as well as her Canadian accredited insurance broker and chartered insurance professional designations. Erin is also a board member on the Insurance Brokers Association of BC, where she has served for the past 3 years. We also have Rhonda Sweeney. Rhonda Sweeney is our office manager at BCFFPA, and she's in charge of the rider insurance program. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our presenters, Erin FitzPatrick and Rhonda Sweeney.
Thanks, Michelle. So Rhonda, did you want to say anything, or should I just get right into the presentation?
You can just go right into it.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, well, again, thanks so much, Michelle, for that introduction, and thank you very much to Michelle and Rhonda and everyone at the BC Federation of Foster Parent Associations for this opportunity to present information on the rider insurance program. And without further ado, I'll just hop right into it. Okay, next slide. Perfect. So the BC Federation of Foster Parent Association Insurance Rider Program. A bit of a background on the program. The Ministry of Children and Family Development and the BC Federation of Foster Parent Associations have contracted together to pay for insurance coverage for family-based resources to ensure that foster parents suffer no additional losses due to the services they provide by having a foster child in their care. So this is a property-specific policy. It's meant to cover property damage in your home. And our office, Megson FitzPatrick Insurance, has administered this program for over 20 years in collaboration with Intact Insurance, who underwrites the program. Next slide, please. So who's eligible for the program? The coverage is extended to all caregivers who have family care home agreements through the Ministry of Children and Family Development, youth justice care homes, or who foster through a delegated Aboriginal agency. So if you meet one of those above criteria, you are automatically covered for the program. You don't need to sign up. You're just automatically included under the program. Next slide, please. In addition to the groups that are automatically covered, some people can purchase the additional coverage as well. So coverage is available for all properly accredited foster parents who work through a private agency. So example, a satellite home. In addition, the coverage is available for foster parents who foster for an Aboriginal band and hold that contract directly with the band. The same coverage and limits apply. However, the price is $330 annually per bed. You do have to have an application as well. It's just a simple one-page application, but there is a $330 premium annually per foster child. Next slide, please. So what's covered under this program? The rider provides coverage against loss or damage to any buildings or contents that you own, rent, or occupy by a residential caregiver due to the acts of the child placed in your care by a director. So that's a social worker who's designated under the Child, Family, and Community Services Act, Section 91. The reason for this is that under your homeowner's policy or your tenant's policy, there's an exclusion for any loss or damage that's caused by a household member. So this policy is meant to bridge that gap and cover any damages that the foster child willfully, criminally, or intentionally causes. Next slide, please. So a few details on the program. The service must be delivered directly to the ministry or a delegated Aboriginal agency. So you have to have a direct contract through MCFD or a delegated Aboriginal agency. The foster parent has to have their own homeowner, tenant, or condominium insurance in place. This policy, this rider policy, is only meant to cover loss or damage caused by the foster child. It's not meant to cover any other host of issues you could have as a homeowner or a tenant. The deductible is $1,000 per occurrence, unless your underlying primary policy indicates a greater amount. So if you have a homeowner's policy and the deductible is $2,500, that would be the deductible under the rider program. The coverage on the rider program mirrors the coverage on the foster parent's own policy. So for example, if your underlying homeowner's policy has a $2,000 limit for any jewelry coverage, any jewelry that you own, the rider would cover up to $2,000 for jewelry that is damaged by a child in your care. This is a group plan. So the insurance program is a group plan, and the master policy is held in the provincial office of the BC Federation of Foster Parent Associations. The BcfFPA administers the policy on behalf of all of those insured under the policy in BC. And then finally, the maximum amount payable under the policy is $500,000. So the maximum coverage for any house or contents damaged by the foster child is $500,000 per claim. So that's per occurrence, $500,000, or the maximum under your homeowner's or tenant's policy, whichever is less. So if your homeowner's policy has a lower limit, that's the most that this policy will pay out. Next slide, please. So what do you do when you have a loss? What happens when your property is damaged by a child in your care? The caregiver, you will submit a claim to the BCFFPA office along with all of these following things. So you need a copy of your primary insurance policy. You need a copy of your agreement or contract with MCFD or the delegated Aboriginal agency. You need to include a written statement of what happened. You don't need to include the child's name. You can just include an initial. Actually, don't include the child's name, just put an initial. If you've replaced any property that was damaged, or if a contractor has come and given you an estimate of the work, you could include that as well. So any estimates or any receipts of property that's already been replaced, pictures of the damage, if that is applicable, and the police file number, if it's a theft claim, you'll need to include that as well. So then once all that information is gathered up, the BCFFPA will forward all the information to our office at Megson FitzPatrick, and then we'll submit the claim to the insurance company, which is Intact Insurance, and then an adjuster for Intact will be assigned and will contact you to gather more information if they need that. It's also really important to note that you have a 2-year limit from when the 2-year time limit from when the occurrence happened to finalize the claim. So it's really important that as soon as an incident happens and you're able to get all of that information together, to send it right away to the office. Don't accumulate claims. So if you have more than one claim, don't wait and bundle them all together, because a deductible applies per incident. So every time something happens, that $1,000 deductible applies. If you have 5 separate claims, that would be 5 separate $1,000 deductibles. It's not beneficial for you or for anyone to accumulate all those claims and submit them at once. You should do it as soon as the claim happens so that you have the maximum amount of time to have the claim settled, which is 2 years from the date of the incident. Okay, next slide, please. So the deductible. MCFD and the delegated Aboriginal agencies will cover the $1,000 deductible of the foster parent's insurance after your foster home maintenance portion is exhausted. So if you have any further questions about that, you can contact the BCFFPA office. Okay, next question. And then a little note about the comprehensive general liability coverage that you have as a foster parent. So this is not a policy that our office administers, but I'm just going to go over it quickly because it is coverage that you have. So the general liability covers all foster parents who have an MCFD contract to which the Social Services Group Liability Program extension is applied. So if you have any questions about that, if that extension is applied to you, you can go to the frequently asked question page with the link right there on the AON website. AON administers this program, so all questions should be directed towards AON. This also has a $1,000 deductible per occurrence for each incident. The premium for this is automatically covered by MCFD, so you don't have to pay it yourself as a foster parent. It's a negligence policy, so it's going to cover any third-party bodily image or property damage that's negligently caused. The coverage also includes any legal fees should the matter be taken to civil court, legal fees and then any settlement that may come out of it. Things that aren't usually covered are costs for any type of abuse, so whether that's sexual, physical, emotional. However, all incidents or claims or writs, if you receive one, should be reported immediately to AON. So if you think you have an incident or a claim that you'd like to submit, you can contact AON at the number there on the screen. And then an insurance company adjuster might be appointed. They may appoint a lawyer for the foster parents if they deem that necessary as part of the claims process. So again, this is a separate liability coverage that is administered by AON. Any questions should be directed towards AON for that one. Okay, next slide. No, actually, that's it. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, we can do those now.
Yeah, to ask a question, our participants have a few options. The instructions are on your screens. For those who would like to use the Q&A option, I will be reading your questions for Erin and Rhonda to answer. Please write your questions as clearly and completely as possible. You can also click on the raise hand function if you would like to speak. Please wait for your name to be called before unmuting your microphone. So perhaps we can start with the questions that were submitted before the webinar. The first question is, does the rider insurance program apply to out-of-care providers?
Okay, so I understand that they're also called kinship givers. So out-of-care providers are called kinship givers. And unless those kinship givers are signing a foster care home agreement, out-of-care families are not covered by this rider insurance policy.
With regards to a rental location, does this refer to a home rental property? Would it extend to a rental location purposely rented for daytime childcare for children under a foster parent MCFD contract?
To my knowledge, this policy is only meant to cover residential properties. So if you're renting a location for childcare, I don't think that if there's damage to that location, it would be covered. That location should have their own insurance covering their own business operations, and any property damage should be covered by their commercial policy. This is it's just meant to cover residential, this policy.
Okay. I'm a foster parent under MCFD contract and do day relief with foster kids not placed in my care and wish to rent a facility. Am I covered by the rider insurance? If so, where can I get a printout of the rider?
Yeah, so if you're an approved foster parent with a valid respite contract in place, the rider would cover any damages done by children in respite care to your home. We don't give printouts of the coverage. It's just really if a claim happens, then you would gather all those things that we talked about previously. So you would take a copy of your home insurance policy, you would get a copy of your contract with MCFD, an incident report, pictures, receipts. You would gather all those things and forward them to the BCFFPA office, and then the claim would be adjusted that way. We don't provide a policy per se or a printout of the coverage to the individual foster parents or respite care workers.
Okay. Fourth question. I'm paying property damage insurance. Do I have to pay extra insurance?
Okay, so this question, it really depends on what type of property damage insurance you have. If you had a homeowner's or a tenant's policy and you're a caregiver with a family care home agreement through MCFD or a delegated Aboriginal agency, then you're automatically covered under this rider insurance program and you do not have to pay extra.
Okay. I will be selling my house next spring. I have a youth who has done some damages to my home. How do I go about claiming the damage so I can have it repaired before I put my house up for sale? Can you please explain the process?
Yeah, so we kind of touched on this briefly in the presentation. So each incident has to be treated as an individual claim. So each of those little incidents that has happened may or may not exceed the $1,000 deductible. So in addition, you only have 2 years to submit the claim from the date of the incident. So you have to make individual claims for each incident that's over the $1,000 deductible amount. You should also speak with your resource worker about the damages if they're under the deductible amount. So again, in order to file a claim, you forward the BCFFPA office the following documents: a copy of your insurance policy, your underlying insurance policy, so your homeowner's or your tenant's insurance policy, or your condominium unit owner's insurance policy if you own your condominium, a copy of the wording, a detailed statement about what happened, including specific dates, times, who was involved, a copy of your foster care home agreement. You just need a copy of the signature page, and then any pictures of the damages, if that's applicable, and then any estimates that you receive from a contractor for the work to repair the damage, or any receipts for any property that's already being replaced. So that's
Sorry, Erin, if I can interject on this for one moment, I think it's really important that if you're planning to, well, in general, if you have any damage, that you do not wait to report it. We've had instances where there's water damage and mold starts to grow. Well, if you've waited 6 months and mold is now growing in your home, that's not covered because you didn't report it from the get-go. So it's really important, regardless of when you're selling your home or either when a damage has happened, that you report it right away and we're not waiting on it. As Erin stated, you have up to 2 years to have it completed, and sometimes some of the claims take a little longer. So as soon as it happens, contact BCFFPA and start to get the paperwork and the documentation together to have that claim start to be processed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like Rhonda mentioned, don't wait and accumulate all the claims and submit them all at once. Just, you should do it as soon as possible so that you can get your property fixed and move along.
Okay, next question. I presently don't have insurance and I'm renting. I assume this webinar will teach us about finding and getting insurance that we need.
Yeah, so as we mentioned, you do have to have an underlying homeowners, tenants, or condominium owners policy for this rider insurance to apply to you. So if you do not have any tenants insurance, you're a renter, you don't have tenants insurance, you can just call a local insurance broker in your area. Could be anyone. There's insurance brokers offices in every town and in the province of BC. So it shouldn't be difficult to find a local insurance broker. You can just contact them and tell them that you're looking for tenants insurance. And then once you have that tenants insurance, that policy is set up, and you have a contract with MCFD, then as we mentioned, you're automatically covered by this rider program.
Does the rider cover damage to vehicles?
No, this does not cover any damage to any vehicles. That is separately insured through ICBC. Vehicles are always excluded in property insurance. Unless the vehicle is like an ATV or some sort of like off-road vehicle, if that was covered under your homeowner's policy, then that would likely be covered under this rider policy as well. But if it's a license plated vehicle that goes on the road, this policy is not going to cover that.
Okay. I'm interested in staff resource insurance and the prospect of hiring staff as private contractors.
Okay, so something like a staffed resource home is more like a commercial business. It is a commercial business, and that is not going to be covered under this rider program. The rider program is just meant to cover residential foster parents and children in their care in their own homes. That is a staffed resource home is more of a commercial business, so you would need to get a separate commercial insurance policy for that.
Okay. Are contracted residential agencies covered by the rider? Are there any differences to their coverage?
Yeah, so we do offer a separate rider insurance certificate program that extends to BC foster parents who work through private agencies or Aboriginal bands. However, this rider for the independent contractors, it's not automatic. You do have to purchase the coverage separately. So you can contact our office. You just have to fill out a really brief one-page application, but you do have to have underlying insurance. So you do have to have a homeowners or tenants or condominium policy, and you do have to advise which agency you work with. As I mentioned before, the cost is $330 per bed. So annually, if you have one foster child in your care, the premium is $330. If you have 2 children in your care, the annual premium is $660. And the limits are the same, so it's a $500,000 limit per claim. However, in this case, the deductible is higher. It is $2,500. So if you had an incident, the deductible that would be applied is $2,500. So if you work with an agency, if you're contracted through an agency as a satellite home, you have to buy your coverage separately, and it's a higher deductible.
Okay. What happens
Erin, if I can,
okay.
sorry, Michelle,
ahead,
can I
Rhonda.
just pipe in on that, on the third party, the other party assurance? Just to let you know, BCFFPA does not cover, take care of that one. That is through Megson FitzPatrick. There are times that we will jump in to help if they're having some struggles getting the information. But if you are working for someone like, say, Plea Family Services, and they purchase the insurance, you would directly be contacting an employee with Megson to get that filed.
Okay. Erin, do you have a follow-up or?
No, yeah, like Rhonda said, you can just contact our office directly with my contact information that's on the slide. And we'll just send you a really easy, quick one-page application or take your information over the phone. And we can get that set up right away. The policy has a common renewal date of April the 1st. So let's say you wanted to sign up now. So let's say you have a child in your care and you want to sign up for November 1st. We would issue you a policy now from November 1st, 2020. And then the policy would expire April 1st, 2021. So you would just be responsible for that portion of the premium, the prorated premium. You wouldn't have to pay the full annual premium. And then the policy would renew again on April the 1st. So if you still have the child in your care, we would issue you another certificate for that additional year.
Okay. What happens when the damage is below the deductible? Who should cover the damage or loss?
Yeah, so if the damage is under the $1,000 deductible, you should get in touch with your resource worker, and likely, I believe BCFP would replace the damaged property or fix the damage in that instance.
Okay. Is the process to settle a claim a lengthy one?
No, it's not a lengthy process, but really, as Rhonda mentioned, the sooner you get all of the information to the BCFFPA office, and then we can get it off to Intact, and the claim will be settled quickly. You know, if it's something as easy as let's say your foster child broke your TV, and you've already, you have pictures of the damaged TV, and then you've already gone out and got a replacement TV, you just send the receipt. And all the information that you have to submit with a claim, and you'll probably just get sent a check for the replacement minus the deductible. So it really depends on the incident that happened, but if it's quite a straightforward incident, it should be settled quite quickly.
We've had claims settled in 2 weeks. We've had claims settled in 6 months. It all depends on how as long as all the documentation is forwarded us to begin with. So we do not forward it to Megson until we have received all the documentation we needed. And then once the insurance company is trying to contact you based upon your availability, also coming into your home, if there's renovations that would be done. So they can't guarantee a certain time or a time limit. It's all going to be based upon how fast we get the documentation, what the damage is, and what your availability is, and having them coming into your home. And even we recognize that you guys are really busy, but they need to contact you in order for us to get this processed.
Okay. Next question. Are claims sometimes refused by the insurer?
Yeah, a claim could be refused by the insurer for several reasons. Sometimes if the damage was not caused by the foster child at all, then that's something that this policy is not meant to cover. In that case, you should just go through your underlying homeowners or tenants insurance policy. A claim might also be refused if you didn't have an underlying home insurance or tenants policy. So let's say you're a foster parent with a contract with MCFD, but either you didn't renew your homeowner's insurance policy or you didn't ever have one in the first place, then this policy will not cover you. Or there could be a specific exclusion under your homeowner's policy. So if something is excluded under your homeowner's policy, and this is similar type of loss, like let's say you have no coverage for jewelry under your homeowner's policy, and then there was damage to jewelry caused by your foster child, then there wouldn't be coverage for that under this policy. So that it has to, the coverage mirrors your underlying policy.
Okay. If a child causes major damage to a friend's house, does the rider cover the costs?
No. So that would be, you should talk to your resource worker in that instance. Any damage to someone else's property would be covered under their insurance. And then sometimes that primary insurance would go after the responsible party. So that insurance company might contact you to settle that because they want to go back and get settlement by the responsible party. So in that case, that might be an instance where the liability policy comes into play because it's property damage to a third party.
The only time that would be different is if you are a relief worker with a contract and you've been taking care of that child. Then obviously the rider then does kick in for a relief worker with a contract with the MCFD or DAA.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, we have a question from Ashley. Thanks for your question, Ashley. Could you clarify what it meant by after the foster home maintenance is exhausted when referring to filing a claim?
Maybe Michelle, you or Rhonda could touch on that. I'm not super familiar with the ins and outs of that.
So the reality is in fostering is the funds will be gone. They'll be exhausted. So basically they were saying if you don't use up all your maintenance funds, which is not a reality, then they would cover that. However, the reality, again, it's always exhausted, so that should never be an issue.
Okay. We have a question from Gary. Thanks for your question. You mentioned a separate CGL with Aon. Does it matter if the child is living with you or if we have an agreement with MCFD?
Again, I don't know. Our office doesn't administer the liability portion, so I would direct that question to Aon. But my understanding is that if you have a direct contract with MCFD, then the child does live with you in your care.
Mm-hmm.
But again, any specific questions about the liability should be directed to Aon.
Okay. If someone is visiting my home and a youth does damage to their car, who pays the deductible?
So again, anything with vehicle needs to be adjusted through ICBC. So this policy does not cover any damage to vehicles, whether you own the vehicle yourself or it's a friend's vehicle that's on your premises. This policy does not cover any damage to vehicles.
Okay. You mentioned damage to your home covered. Is damage to the rental facility covered? For example, space in a community hall or building being used with a foster child as a safe place. Am I covered at this facility? If they have to pay through their insurance, then will this rider cover the deductible?
So that facility should have their own insurance, their own property insurance, and they should be making a claim under their own insurance. And again, this is kind of similar situation to if your foster child does damage while they're visiting a friend's house. The person who owns the facility needs to make a claim in their own insurance, and then you can talk to a resource worker. If it's like a small damage, then maybe MCFD would just cover that. But if it's a larger incident, then that facility's insurer may file a claim, and that would be the Aon liability coverage that would respond, because it's property damage to a third party. So again, this policy is a rider, residential rider. It's just meant to cover your own residence that you either rent or own, not someone else's.
Okay. Next question. What if a child has a history of arson? Will it be covered by the rider?
Yeah, so if the child, sets fire to your home and there's damage to your home, that's something that would be covered by the rider up to the $500,000 limit or the maximum limit under your policy. This policy doesn't discriminate against a child's past behavior, so there would be no issue there.
Okay. If reference to vehicles and ATVs, what about travel trailers like RVs?
If the RV, again, my understanding is that that's something that's plated on the road. It has a license plate and it's registered with ICBC, so that would be something that would be covered by ICBC. If for whatever reason it's covered on your home insurance policy, then it would be covered under this policy. But I don't think trailers and RVs are covered under home insurance policies. I think they're covered through ICBC.
Okay. I'm providing relief for another foster parent and the child damages my home. Will the rider cover me?
Yeah, so if you're providing respite work and you have your own agreement with MCFD, this policy would cover you.
Okay. Does the rider cover theft?
Yes, so if the foster child steals something from you, this is something that would be claimable under the policy. However, you do need to call the police and file a police report, and that has to be included in your claim submission.
Okay. What date do we use for a statement if we likely discover damage weeks after it was done?
So if you only discover the damage a week or so after it was done and you don't know the exact date, then you would just use the date that you discovered the damage. So either, the date that the damage occurs, or the date as soon as you discover it.
Okay. Does the rider cover ongoing damage?
Yes and no. So, as we mentioned, you shouldn't accumulate a bunch of damage and then submit it thinking it's going to be one incident. Each incident is its own separate claim. So, if you have a foster child that punches the walls repeatedly, each time, each date that they have, they punch the wall, that's one incident, that's one occurrence. So if it happens, let's say it happens 3 times over 2 weeks, they do it on October the 13th, October the 20th, and then on October 31st. Those are 3 separate incidences, and those have to be adjusted separately, and they each have to have their own deductible.
It does not cover wear and tear.
Yeah, exactly. So an insurance policy is not a maintenance policy. It's not meant to cover, like Rhonda said, wear and tear and things like that. it's accidental, or in this case, willful or criminal damage.
Okay. So we've got another question from Ashley. How much collaboration is done with the MCFD office in terms of the resource and guardianship worker to ensure that the damages of the child in care is substantiated, and to ensure that they are aware so they can prepare for the deductible expense? Maybe Rhonda can speak to this point.
Michelle, I'm sorry, I didn't turn my phone off and it rang. So can you repeat that for me so I get the answer it properly?
The question is, how much collaboration is done with the MCFD office in terms of the resource worker and guardianship worker to ensure the damages of the child in care is substantiated, and to ensure that they are aware so they can prepare for the deductible expense?
So just being a foster parent, you should be in regular contact with your ministry worker or MCFD resource worker on a regular basis in regards to anything happening in the home and about the child. So to how much you collaborate with them, I can't tell. I can't speak to that, but I do think, and we do suggest, highly suggest, that you tell them about the damage before you, or even as you are doing the claim. So always being in contact. They should know what's going on in your home, and they should be aware of any incidents.
Okay, we have a couple questions from the chat box. I have a youth that breaks our light switches and have received no coverage from the ministry. We have to replace them every few months, but this is less than $1,000 damage. So would this not be covered because it's under the $1,000 deductible?
Yeah, unfortunately, if it's under the $1,000 deductible, this policy will not cover it. And again, I guess just speak to your resource worker about that.
So what I would do in those instances, anything less than $1,000, I would still suggest that you guys create almost like a file or even a claim. Bring to them pictures of the damage, bring them to them receipts or invoices of what it's going to cost to replace, so that your worker is very aware of what's happened and they have all the information that they need to go ahead and reimburse you guys.
Okay. Is there a premium that we have to pay to get covered by the rider?
So it depends. If you have a direct contract with MCFD or a delegated Aboriginal agency, and you have an underlying home insurance or tenants policy, then you do not have to pay a premium for this policy. You're automatically covered. However, if you are contracted through a satellite agency, like Access Family Resources or one of those, or an Aboriginal band, then you do have to sign up for a policy separately. It's a certificate program, and you do have to pay, it's $330 per year per child in your care. So if you have a direct contract with MCFD or a delegated Aboriginal agency, no, you don't have to pay. If you work through an agency or a band, if you're contracted with a band, then yes, you do have to pay.
Okay, that's all the questions that I've seen from the chat box and the Q&A box. Let's just check if we have anyone who would like to speak. No. Does anyone have any questions? You can use the Q&A box or the chat box, or use the Zoom hand raise function. Okay. Okay, there's one question from Catherine, but it's not complete. Catherine, could you please type your question again? Okay. So Catherine's question is, does writing with a permanent felt pen be considered damage?
Sorry, what was that? I just didn't hear that.
Does writing with a permanent felt pen be considered damage? Like writing on the walls?
Yeah, definitely. So if the foster child takes a permanent marker and writes all over the walls and you need to have your walls repainted, that's something that would be covered as long as it's over the $1,000 deductible.
Let's just pause to see if there are any questions. Okay. Does the BCFFPA or the insurer discuss other ways of repairs before the claim is completed? For example, replacing a whole couch.
So if it was a whole couch that needed to be replaced, that's something that would be covered under this rider program. So you would just submit your claim in the process, via the way that we outlined. I don't really know any other way that it would be settled.
Okay. I think Ashley has a follow-up. Ashley, you're unmuted.
Thank you. I couldn't type fast enough. I was actually just wondering, replacing the couch versus looking at it in terms of repairing upholstery. Do we discuss those options with our caregivers before we go through with a claim?
Yeah, so if you think that you can repair the couch with just replacing some upholstery or cleaning the upholstery, and let's say that's going to be under the $1,000, then definitely that's something you could discuss with your resource worker, if that is a viable solution that's going to work for you.
Okay, so that would be up to the ministry as opposed to them asking the caregiver those specific questions?
No.
Okay.
It's their property. So if they're going to decide that it's not necessarily going to be able to be replaced through upholstery, and it's better for that it will look better, and it's something that it's their property. So if they decide they want to go with the new couch versus upholstering, then that's the option that they have.
Okay, they have that option then. Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, the policy is a replacement cost policy. So that means you get new for old, basically. So if you had a couch, that was a few years old and the foster child, ripped part of the upholstery or wrote all over it with permanent marker or something like that, you're not going to get a couch. Oops, sorry. You're not going to get a couch that's the same age as the one that you had. You're going to get a new couch that's of similar, make, model, kind, similar material and whatnot. So the adjuster will do their best to try to find, or you will do your best to try to find a couch that's of similar like, kind, and quality to the one that you're replacing, but it would be a new couch. We're not going to give you a secondhand couch.
Great, thank you.
Ashley, do you have a follow-up? I can still see that your hand's up.
I didn't know I can lower it. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Ashley. Okay, we've got a question from Catherine. What about bedroom furniture being damaged from youth changing their bedroom around often?
Again, no, this policy is not going to cover wear and tear. So if, and again, it's per incident. So if the youth moves their furniture around a lot, like let's say they redecorate their room every week and the floor starts to get scratched because of that, that's not something this policy is going to cover. However, if the youth had like a behavioral problem, like they had an outburst or something, and they took some heavy furniture and moved it all around the room because they were having a behavioral issue, that's something and that was one instance that just happened as a one-off thing, then that's something that would potentially be covered. But if it's just, general wear and tear, moving furniture around, that's not going to be covered.
Okay. What if it's hard to find a similar item with an item that needs replacement? For example, it's discontinued.
So if it's like a piece of, like, let's say it's a television, the model that you have is discontinued, then you would just do your best to find the most similar television that's, you know, the most similar to the one that you had. But if it's like, oh, I had a fax machine and, you know, now it's broken and I can't get a new fax machine, I don't know, to be honest, in that instance. You know, things that have any sort of, in insurance, things that have like a sentimental value or like those can't really be covered, right? Because they can't be replaced. So things like fine art, jewelry, things that are unique usually need to be scheduled separately because they are really hard to be replaced. So if it's like a unique piece of art or a piece of jewelry or, you know, something that can't easily be replaced, you should talk to your home insurance broker and see how they would cover it. And if it's covered under your home insurance policy, then it would be covered under the rider policy.
If I can just make a note in regards to, like, say a child came in and they took a knife to your cupboard doors and you had to replace all the cupboard doors. They would find something similar to value that it's not, the policy is not for upgrading. If you want to upgrade, by all means, they're going to cover the cost of what it is to replace it, and then you would be responsible for the difference if you choose to upgrade, whether that be flooring, whether that be cupboards, whatever it may be.
Yeah, thanks. That's a good point, Rhonda.
Okay, another question. This is a follow-up to Ashley's question regarding the couch. If a youth uses a knife to cut a small cut in material on couch, is that covered?
If it's over the $1,000 deductible, then it would be covered. Mm-hmm. I guess it's just a matter of if the homeowner, if the foster parent is willing to live with it or not. So if it's just a small cut on the back of the couch and that's something that the homeowner can live with, the foster parent can live with, then they wouldn't file a claim. But if it's a cut in the very middle of the couch and it's altering the appearance of it and it's, you know, not acceptable, then they could file a claim. And that's something that would likely be covered because you would have to replace the whole couch. So it, you know, claims really depend on the unique circumstances and the instances surrounding them. So you just kind of have to look at things that way.
Okay, do we have any more questions? Let's just pause for a few seconds to see if there are any more questions. Okay, it looks like there are no more questions. Thank you, Erin and Rhonda. Thank you for sharing your time and expertise with us. We will be sending everyone a copy of the PowerPoint slides and some resources about the rider insurance program. We'd like to thank everyone for joining our webinar today. BCFFPA is always here for you. Don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any questions about the rider insurance program. You can email us at office@bcfosterparents.ca or call 1-800-663-9999. Have a great day, everyone.